Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Wow, already the third session of the day. It's going by so fast. So we are joining you from Career Fair Employer Connect at Royal Road University today. And the session now is Interview Trends, Impacts on Career Transitions. And as we get started here, very important for us at Royal Roads University to acknowledge the traditional lands that we're on. So maybe just take a deep breath, connect your feet to the floor, and just think of the Indigenous lands that you're joining us from across Canada, across the world. Here at Royal Roads University, we are joining you from the Lagwagon-speaking people known as the Sonhi and Esquimalt nations and families. And it's with deep gratitude that we learn, play, love, live on those unceded territories. So thank you so much. Feel free to use the chat option if you know the territories you're joining us from. And more people are coming in. Welcome, welcome. As I mentioned, student, you can rename yourself, maybe adding the program you're from. We have tons of programs at Royal Road, tons of students. So if you can let us know, so then the panelists can see. Megan will lead the discussion with our panelists. We'll have some question time and very important networking time as well. And if you have any tech issue or any question, you can connect with me in the chat for sure. So I'll pass it over to you, Megan. I can't hear you. I don't know if you're still.
No, I just
We needed to do
I've been
it. That's
doing this for
okay.
2 or 3 years. It's like it's a bingo. Y'all need a bingo card. Someone says, "Oh, you're on mute," and bingo, you win. I did it. So my apologies. You'd think after this many years of doing this online, I would be better at that. But yes, I was on mute there. My apologies. I have just gone ahead and put the questions in the chat just in case any of the students are wondering where the responses are coming from if they happen to miss a question. I haven't heard from Tam yet. I think she might be having some technical difficulties joining us. So I'm going to just lead this from a capacity of engaging with Sylvia and her work with the Parole Board, the work that the Parole Board does, and potentially the work within corrections as well, because they do collaborate. So she may be able to answer some of those questions, but we'll make that caveat that she doesn't work there and she showed up today representing the Parole Board. So from that place. I'm really excited to hear this conversation today, just because of the amount of incredible work that I know that the Parole Board does do. I've had the privilege of working in a number of different organizations over the years. One was with Haven Society as a director of women fleeing violence, and a lot of our women often engaged with support workers through community services, through court processes, through different programming initiatives, lots of different connections with legal services and the court, and the work that Parole Services does to integrate people back into the community, as well as keep people safe from their protective matters and their certain matters, is really incredible. So I feel privileged to be here today to learn and to hear and to facilitate some conversation with Sylvia. So I'll open the floor to Sylvia just to take a moment to introduce herself, a little bit about what she does and herself. So please, by all means.
Thanks, Megan. So as I was introduced, my name is Sylvia. I currently work for the Parole Board. I have been with the Parole Board since 2012 in various different positions. I started off as a communications assistant. I worked in finance, which had nothing to do with the offenders, really. I moved up to hearing officer, where I attended hearings and essentially was responsible for facilitating hearings and giving offenders instructions as to their legal rights within the hearing process, the parole board hearing process. And currently I'm working as a regional communications officer, which is actually kind of the opposite of what a hearing officer does. I work with victims now. So I help keep victims informed on the offender that harmed them. When there's a review coming up, when there's a hearing coming up, facilitating and helping them with their statements, because within the parole process or the parole review and hearing process, there's a number of victims' rights that they have the right to have a say in the process, and one of them is writing their statements. So I help them with that. I will attend hearings with them, either virtually or in person. It's right now, because of COVID and technology changes, that's one of the options that have opened up. So victims that are not comfortable having to be in an institution that close to an offender can attend virtually and still hear and see everything that goes on in the hearing process. So the other side is what I'm doing today. We are trying to do as much outreach with community, victim services, the universities, to help educate the public, to help educate victim service groups, and today finding recruitment for my colleagues at CSC as well. So that's kind of a gist. Couple of things just to give perspective, because there's a lot of confusion, miscommunication out there in the public, and the media sometimes is not always the parole board's friend. But the parole board is not responsible for parole officers. So that falls under corrections. So anything that has to do with offender supervision, whether inside or outside of the institution, falls under correctional services. The parole board is responsible for making decisions on conditional release. So we don't supervise, we don't tell corrections how to supervise. That's how the split happens between the parole board and correctional services. So correctional services, how we sort of merge, has a victim service unit. And so those victim service officers are the people that I am in communication with on a daily basis, pretty much, because we share, for lack of a better explanation, we share victims. So because they will inform victims of supervision things with offenders, like if they're transferring or medical absences, that sort of thing, that would be corrections that tells them. And then I tell them about hearings or what have you. But often there's things that coincide. So that's sort of how we split our day-to-day work. Statements that are written by victims, they can either be processed by corrections or processed by parole. Either way, we share a system where we both get it. So that's how we split our day-to-day work. So that's kind of a little nutshell. I don't know how much detail you want me to go
No,
into.
well, I think it's great. And I think some of the questions will help sort of expand on some of the sort of, overarching topics that you discussed. But it really is interesting to hear, when you said sort of sharing victims, it really interesting though, like how many pieces really do take place in the wheel of justice or in the justice system in order for somebody to receive or to feel supported by or to have an equitable outcome. There's a lot of pieces in play. It's not one person, one organization. Like you said, it's a lot of pieces that help inform that process.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's just the, sort of the surface work, right? So on parole side, to get ready for a hearing, we have case review officers that have to get all the police reports and the judge's comments and the victim statements, and then it goes to the hearing officers who have to make sure that the offender knows their rights and has an assistant if they want one. And so there's tons that goes on in the background. And to give a little perspective, typically from the time an offender applies for, say, day parole to the time they're actually reviewed can be about 6 months.
wow.
That's how much case preparation has to be done in order to get it ready to be reviewed.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of pieces then to ensure sort of due process and sort of equity within that everybody has the same information that's brought forward, or for those that are reviewing their release, conditional release, or what it be, that they have all access to the same answers to the same questions. So we're always looking at it. Yeah, no, and you never really think about it, but all the interplay of all those pieces.
Yeah. And the offender side to that as well is that anything that the board has on their file that they're considering in the review, the offender has the legal right to have all the information that we're using shared with them. So all that file information, psych reports, victim statements, everything. And under the law, they have they have to have it at least 15 days before their review. They can choose to waive that right if they want, but there's some tight timelines with some things where it's a real scramble at the end to make sure everybody has what they need.
Yeah, well, and that's why people aren't showing up to, job or career fairs necessarily, because that predicates that something wouldn't allow for a file to be completed for due process for that to get in front of, where it needs to be or what needs to be for that to take place. So yeah, that's, and so speaking of it being sort of the labor market that it is, and there being these, there's such a tight labor market, what's your top sort of hot tip for students or for applicants in today's labor market, whether it be for parole or for corrections? Like, what do you recommend?
So, to be honest with you, parole and corrections, we fall under the Government of Canada umbrella as a whole. In the Government of Canada, I mean, I worked for Indigenous Affairs, I worked for employment insurance programs, I worked for Workshare. Probably you're all too young to know what that was when it happened, but many different departments, many different jobs. That is the absolute advantage to Government of Canada, because I don't like to stay anywhere too long personally. So the Government of Canada has a jobs.ca, well, jobs.gc.ca. So that's the government job website where all government jobs are posted. The thing about government that would be different than private sector is they want details, they want facts, they want dates. So typically, I know when I used to apply for jobs, I hand in my resume, maybe a nice cover letter with that to profile myself and send it in. With the Government of Canada, often with the applications you see on the jobs.gc.ca, they have questions. They have a section where you can cut and paste your resume, but then they have sorted questions, and they want detailed examples. For instance, like, do you have experience with Excel? They want detailed, yes, I work in Excel, in finance, and whatever it is, but that's the type of detail they want. And the government gets hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, and not answering those questions specifically detailed, even sometimes they ask for dates when you did this, can automatically screen you out of a process. So it's extremely important if you're applying to answer those questions. Don't put see your resume, don't put answer the questions, because you can get screened out just as easy as that. So my best advice would be, set yourself up on a job, like a job alert on jobs.ca. So if you want corrections, and there is one for victim service officer currently on jobs.ca, I think it closes next week. So if you get your application in before midnight of the last day, it might get you a foot in right away. But yeah, that's my best advice, and that goes across Government of Canada. So it's not always who you know in this case. The other thing with government, parole, and corrections included is that we have positions that are casual positions, so 90 days in a calendar year. We have term positions, so sometimes you can be hired for a term of 6 months or a year, and sometimes those get extended, or you can be hired indeterminately, which means full-time. You don't have to worry about a contract going up. But if you're looking at maybe getting your feet wet and you don't want to jump all in, I would encourage you to send in your resume for casual, and just send it to whatever, whether it's parole or corrections, just send it to the office, and casual wise they can hire that way. But for terms and indeterminates, it's the jobs.ca website.
I think that's such a great piece of advice too, is thinking of it from a capacity of, maybe jobs for now, careers for later, but from a sense of getting your foot in the door. Maybe you're not thinking about 5 years from now, or like you said, Sylvia, the opportunity to move within government is so ripe for opportunity for those of us who are multi-potentialites and have different skill sets or like to apply themselves in different ways. There's lots of, it doesn't need to be, oh, I'm entering in and this is my career and I better just get that one career job. Going in a casual or auxiliary capacity, does that affect a resume against another candidate who had never had casual experience or government experience? Let's say if the two resumes were close.
It could.
Yeah.
It could, because sometimes, depending on what the job is, sometimes they need so there's absences all the time, like leave of absences, sickness, like things are just not planned, and sometimes they need someone in that can jump in and they've done the job, right? Yeah. When it comes to applying for, say, a posted position, that can help because you're showing that you already have experience in that background.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And absolutely true. Like as with any organization or union or collective agreement or structure of a hierarchy of a government, you know how it works, right? And
Yeah.
part of that is just knowing that you're going to bring someone onto the team that, while they may bring a value add, or they may fit really well with the team, or they may have a complementary skill set,
Yeah.
they also understand some of the nuances potentially of like, oh well, there's be some red tape on that,
Yeah.
or no, we have to ask that team before we do this thing, right? Those
Yep.
nuances that sometimes, when you don't know an organization, you come in gung-ho and you want to do all this change, and it's like, hold your horses a bit, there's some things here that we all have to follow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's and just so to be clear on the casual part, so it is 90 days in a calendar year, but don't be mistaken, just because you're not maybe not yet a term or indeterminate, just because you work, say, 90 days with parole doesn't mean that you couldn't work an additional 90 days with corrections.
Mm-hmm.
So, because our organizations are so closely intertwined, sometimes referrals are made to corrections or vice versa on a really good casual that they had, and the casual hasn't gotten a term position. We have, through the years I've been here, we have a lot of people that have gone back and forth between the two organizations. They've maybe started as a casual, got a term, and then now are indeterminate. So
Mm-hmm.
I know it's kind of a scary thing to take a casual job for 90 days, not knowing what the outcome is. But the one thing that I did with the government is I've always taken risks. I've
Mm-hmm.
taken acting assignments. Maybe it's 4 months. Maybe I don't know what's going to happen after. I go back to my old job. I get that one permanently, move on. But there's always, always, always options. It's just a matter of understanding what the expectations are in the job that you're doing. And personally, my personal advice is I'm a go-getter. I'm above and beyond. So if I'm bored, I sort the file room. I don't care. But anything that shows initiative is never going to be a bad thing.
I think that's a great way to look at it too, is these are different experiences. I am also like that, Sylvia. I've never had that fear of like, oh, well, it's only a year. Well, you don't know if you're going to like this full-time job in a year anyway, if you were to apply for another role. So look at this as an opportunity of scaffolding your skill sets and building on them and networking within an organization. Gosh, you're in front of, the head of corrections, or you're in front of the head of the parole board or the communication. Like, think about all these relationships internal. Yeah. And like Sylvia said, like, oh gosh, we've got this great term, and we've just got nothing for them, but we'd really love to keep them because maybe you got something for bit. We'd like them back eventually, and we don't want to lose them to another organization. And so it's kind of like this hot tip being like, don't put down any opportunity that you think, might not lead you to where you're going to get to, because it all is scaffolding to a certain degree, because it will all make sense, right? Like you've said, in the different departments you've gone to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that 90 days that I keep talking about for casual, it doesn't have to be 90 days in a row. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be 5 days a week for, 3 months or what have you, 4 months, it could be 3 days a week. It could be 4 days a week. I mean, it depends on what the operational need would be at the time, but there are ways for it to provide opportunity to explore other things if you want, take a couple other courses, whatever it is. It's not always set in stone that it's, 37 and a half hours a week, 5 days a week for 90 days. Yeah. So just keep that in mind.
And we've really seen that because of the change in the labor market too, right? Because the changing needs of business or the changing needs of our clients, and that all impacts the what we hire for or what we do or what we need, on a team. And that's interesting. It kind of leads us into the last question, which I'll sort of go back to the first two, in that like the labor market has changed. So how do you approach like workforce planning? Like how does your organization look at that with everything changing? Like how has that changed what you might do in recruiting?
So we're constantly a moving target. So COVID kind of, and people are probably really, really tired of hearing it, but it really, really changed the way my department and most of Parole does business, right? So my manager had to do a really, really good job of forecasting. So as for the first part of COVID, we weren't doing any hearings that we were doing hearings because we had to, but it was just the board members and the offender doing it virtually. So we didn't have any observers, victim observers, anything. So once we got our technology sort of working and moving, then we were able to start bring those observers in. So, but with that brought what we have now is our hybrid hearings. So nobody anticipated that for some hearings, if there's multiple observers, if we have media involved, if we have that we need, I was telling Megan before we started, we had a hearing recently, it took 5 of us and we only have 6. Yeah. So because you need somebody to manage virtual people, you need someone to manage in-person people, you need someone to manage media because they don't get to be with the same victim group. And we have several cases where the victim group there has to be certain members that are separate because they can't have contact for whatever reason. There's conflicts, there's whatever. And typically, if there's more than 6 victim observers, we take 2 of us already. So that's taken a lot of planning because that was a huge change. So yeah, we need extra resources for that. We need extra resources because now we have outreach. Our radar's up right now because, we could have a change in Parliament where that affects how we do business because it affects direction. So workforce planning, we are constantly, borrowing from our other departments, giving acting opportunities in the departments that need it and up and down. So again, like I said, just because you apply for one job and that's what you want, I've had 6 different jobs at Parole in 12 years. So it can happen. And often we're not privy to the succession planning that's going on in the background. But they're always working on something because the one thing about Parole and corrections is that there is legislative timeframes with offenders' sentences and reviews that they've had. So even during COVID, if we don't review an offender by their legislative timeframe, they could be released because we're holding them illegally. And if they're released that way, because we miss jurisdiction, then they're released with no conditions, no halfway house. So we just can't let that happen. So we can't, there's positions that cannot be empty.
Well, and it's so interesting to hear you say that. I know it sounds like Nancy's probably got a question from the field. Oh no, okay. She's just coming in to show her beautiful face. But thinking of like changing technologies and the complexity of work environments, and to me that really speaks to like in your cover letter or in your interview or in the networking that you're doing, talking about those kinds of skills. Like, I'm very good at using Zoom or managing chats or working with team members to accomplish a goal together where we all have different moving parts to achieve X, Y, Z. I bet that would be music to your ears if you were to hear something like that.
It would. I mean, so in my current job, I have 2 computer screens because we read a lot of legal documents. So I have a vertical one, I have a horizontal one, and we work with about 8 different programs at once. So between the one we share with corrections, one of our integrated systems, I have that program up in 3 separate screens because I have to do so much different work and flipping back and forth. So being able to portray those skills on paper is excellent because that's our world. It's an overused expression, but it's like squirrel. You're constantly all over, and the reprioritizing daily within minutes is you have to be ready to change. I have a hearing on the island on Tuesday. I have to leave Monday morning, and I have somebody that just requested to observe that hearing. So I have to get them approved. I have to let the offender know that they're going. I have to get gate passes ready at the institution for them to be there. So it's busy, constant, and reprioritizing is music to our ears. If you can do that.
There's a great question in the chat. And I know when I reached out to the regional corrections sort of recruitment officer, I think we did a 5 questions with corrections. And one of the sort of like, what would you be surprised at, in corrections? And one of the answers was like, well, just the breadth and depth of types of roles that we have. And some of the roles, is like dog handling, right? You don't think about that, right? You don't think about that. It's like, but I love dogs. That'd be amazing, right? And then some of the questions were related to, Indigenous corrections and the types of services offered and the sort of restorative justice pieces and, sweat lodge or working in different types of community-based rehabilitation over the traditional model that exists. So that's interesting from the question chat came, I'm Indigenous, and is a connection to culture beneficial in my cover letter? So from your perspective, Sylvia, what would the answer to that be?
Absolutely. And we are doing, we've been doing elder assisted hearings for years, for instance. And now we're bringing on other cultures. We have a Black cultural consultant now who's going to start attending hearings. But we also, just so everyone knows, because we're Government of Canada as well, we prioritize Indigenous, visible minorities, women. So we really encourage them to work. And I know within corrections, not specifically parole board right now, but within corrections, they do have specific Indigenous roles. And if you go on that jobs website, you'll see jobs where they are specifically looking for Indigenous peoples. Because our offender population is way overrepresented by Indigenous peoples. So the more connection to culture that they have within and the more people that they can relate to, the better. And it is a huge Government of Canada, and especially parole and corrections right now. It's a huge thing. So absolutely.
As well as, great question, Joy, and great answer, Sylvia, is sort of an understanding of trauma response and being able to look through a trauma-informed lens in the justice system, because we know this representation of Indigenous people within the justice system is often due, to trauma as well. So something to think about there to showcase that. I would imagine.
And the female offenders as well, because not only are they overrepresented, like the Indigenous population, but female offenders offend for a completely different reason than male offenders. So there's a lot of work, including on parole board side. We're starting to hold our hearings a little bit differently for female offenders. So for Indigenous offenders that ask for it, we already hold them differently. There's no desk like I'm in front of. There's a circle. Our elder does a prayer. Our elder provides guidance and, maybe some helpful information to the offenders. The offenders often have their correctional service elder with them that they work with within the institution. So we're really trying to work towards more trauma-informed hearings. And I know corrections is working hard at getting more people, specifically Indigenous, to be there for the offenders.
That's a great answer. Thank you. And I really have seen a massive change in the type of work that your organization, the government, as well as corrections has done in sort of changing and the complexities and the descriptions of the jobs, to better serve, empathize and connect with the members of the population that find themselves in those environments or accessing those services. As well as the connection to persons with disabilities and ensuring that they understand the materials and are those being communicated in what way, and do they have access to those, whether it is technology, like you mentioned, or whether it is language support or written versus verbal. I see a lot of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's great to see. So that question I think was fantastic. I think this brings me kind of that question, like, how can candidates showcase their knowledge in a non-traditional way? I know we've talked about the application, like, don't forget to say in 2010 to 2012, you did pivot tables in Excel. I know that sounds silly, but they want to hear that, in there. But let's go back to that non-traditional way, maybe that it's in an interview or a networking event. What are some of the ways that candidates can showcase this?
Yeah, I would say, to be honest, so the application process, it's not quite as easy. I mean, you can attach a cover letter, but that's pretty traditional. people will use the question boxes. There's like a maximum amount of characters that they can use. So I would say, do your best to try to intertwine it while specifically answering the question given. But the interview would be a place to really showcase that. And the interviews are normally same thing. They have prepared questions. They give you time in a room to write down whatever answers you want to give. I know when I've done it, I just put short forms, like, this is what I want to talk about, because it's verbal. They're not going to study what you've written for yourself. And that's where you truly showcase, when you give those concrete examples, and those ones don't have to be as detailed and scripted as the application, because you already got through that part of the process. Now they want to meet the person behind the written stuff. So that I would say the interview, when you get to that point, that's your time to shine. And they always give you an opportunity to ask questions or say something at the end of the interview, and then that can be your last, like, this is me, see me roar, and I can do this better than anyone else.
Yeah,
it's not bad to be confident.
No, it isn't. And to showcase learned or lived or cultural experience or disability experience or part of an equity seeking group, that I gained this experience from this. There's no shame, there's no judgment. Think about the section of population that these individuals see every day. It's about learning to tell your story, what you learned from it, and what skills that you gained from that, and what you're going to bring to the role. And I think practicing in front of the mirror that story, or maybe you have something there.
Yeah, it's good. And the other thing is too, corrections, sometimes I know a lot of people take criminology, and we've had a lot that have come through here that actually want to be a correctional officer, and a lot of the younger people straight out of university, straight out of their schooling. We had one here, and she was 20 years old, I think, and she kept getting screened out after the interview. She'd get screened in. And so the feedback she was given, so just as an aside, if you ever get screened out of a process, there's another process where you can ask for feedback so that they can tell you, what they were looking for versus what they heard or what have you. But so this person was told that they did not have enough life experience. So if you ever hear that from corrections or parole, what they're really saying, our job and the content information, the files that we have to read. There's a lot, and they're finally starting to recognize vicarious trauma in just reading those files. I mean, your full details, the police reports, the judges' comments over time, over and over and over and over again. That's a lot. That's a lot mentally for people to take. And when you're inside the institution, there's a completely different imminent risk. You are always on guard, right? Anything can happen in those, and they have in those in the prisons, in the institutions. So when they're saying life experience, my advice to this person: go volunteer for victim services with the RCMP. Go volunteer with a women's shelter. Go volunteer at the men's victim of crime group. Anywhere that you're going to get exposure to these horrific things that have happened to people. Because these are the people that you're going to be in front of all the time. Whether you're working with them, whether you're guarding them, whatever, this is what you're going to be exposed to. So that would be my advice for when you're applying very specifically corrections as well, but life experience, showcase that.
Yeah, I think that's such a great comment too. And you may find as you start to build sort of your career management profile or your capital, much sort of like Sylvia and I talked about, like scaffolding different experiences, you're going to figure out what matters to you and what works for you, and what and where it's a fit for you and what isn't a fit. Sometimes that's the opportunity that instead of on a job, that volunteering can do for you. Say like, wow, I am such a soft person, I'm not hard enough at this point in my life. Maybe give me 10 years and I'll harden up a bit and I'll try this, but I'm too soft right now to be in this place. However, I still know I've got a very strong social justice background. What does that mean then? And starting to meet those, have those conversations and meet people and be like, I'm a better fit over here, right? It's a
Exactly. I mean, there's just so many options. Corrections, you've got behavioral counselors, you've got program facilitators, you've got the correctional officers, or you've got the parole officers, or, and here we have administrative, you could work in the records department, you could work, with us, it is victims, and you have to be prepared that you will get saturated with victim information and details and hurt and emotions and all that other thing. But if you have a little bit of that life experience, it will help you. It will help digest. It will help positive coping mechanisms. Like I go for walks at lunch. I take my full 1 hour, I walk, whether I'm working from home or working in the office, I go. It's, so it's a big thing to take on, but I have to say, I've always felt rewarded. So
I think that's a great story, and I think just great advice as well. We're heading sort of up to 2:00. It's great actually, Tam, that you joined. There's so many questions for Sylvia that we had, but Tam is sort of and it's great because you talked about volunteering, and I was like, oh gosh, this couldn't have led even better into the kind of work that Tam does. But it's great, Tam, if you can actually stay on and join our next session, and I can almost facilitate a networking session just with you like I did with Sylvia. But is there any questions for Sylvia? I know we talked about a lot today, or anything that the students were surprised to hear. I'd really like to hear, because for me, that was really impactful, like someone who's worked in and around those kinds of services for most of their career, and really knowing that there are so many ways in which you can effectuate change and be part of the solution. You can be part of making a difference for someone, whether it is you're working on the corrections side, the parole side, the victim services side, or the programs within the community that also share victims, like Sylvia said, whether it is career development or whether it is social services or not-for-profits, seeing them at the food bank or whatnot. A lot of that is all connected to getting the right services in front of the people who need them. So there's a great question again in the chat. Joy did a practicum for her diploma in a remand center in Alberta. Would that be helpful experience to talk about when applying potentially with the parole board?
Absolutely. Especially, remand. So for those who don't know, remand is sort of where they house everyone who's who are like going to trial or have been suspended or whatever. So you can have anything from somebody who stole something from 7-Eleven to somebody who is about to go on trial for murder. It's everybody sort of in the same place. So if you can imagine the different backgrounds, socioeconomic, histories, backgrounds, all in one room with the worst of the worst to the I don't like the term, but petty crime, they're all in one place. So in our files, we often will read about offenders essentially being deplorable in remand.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason for that is fight or flight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If they're not the tough person in prison, they will be the victim. And so in remand, there's so much of that. And then you see them get into the institutions, whether it be provincial, because it's a provincial sentence, or federal. A lot of them, all of a sudden, it calms down. Their back isn't up the same way, and they start to settle into the process, because when they come into custody, federal custody, we call it being pen placed. So that they, based on their violence, their offenses, their everything else, the board, not the parole board, but the corrections board decides if they're going to be minimum, medium, or maximum security. So that kind of splits your offenders up a bit. That puts them in an environment that's as most suited as it could be. So remand, if you got through remand, I mean, you can get through anything, in my opinion, because I wouldn't want to work there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's tough, right? And there'd be, Joy says it was something,
Yeah.
in her response. Sylvia, I know some of the students are going to ask, is there a way for us to connect, with you, or can we learn more? Are you comfortable sharing your email, or is there a better, oh, you are? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
encourage the students to reach out, even if it is to find out more information, to make a connection, to see what the opportunities are for volunteerism or for casual or auxiliary positions, or to potentially go after that position post-graduation that you have always wanted, and never been quite sure how to get your foot in the door. So Sylvia has been great, and just went ahead and put that in the chat there. Hopefully there was some great information. I know I appreciated having Sylvia here today and hearing from you.
I just have one more thing to say. Just for students that maybe aren't graduating yet, the Government of Canada itself, Parole Board does it as well, has a federal student work program where they hire students to do jobs within, under this program. Often they'll hire people outside of this program. So if you go to the Parole Board of Canada and go under student opportunities, it's called FS, Federal Student Work, FSWP.
FSWEP is what we
Yes,
affectionately call it over here, because I don't know all the words, is really what it is.
I would encourage you to go there, do that as well, because it's another way to get your foot in, to get some experience. And, corrections does it as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And so before we sort of release, and I use that word, funnily due to the conversation today, is there any questions that anyone has for Sylvia? Obviously, we're deeply grateful that you were able to join today, and that we were able to have a great conversation, really about all the different roles that were available, that are potentially different than people thought, coming into the session today.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sylvia and Megan. Yeah, in the room here, we were laughing when you mentioned about the 6 different jobs or roles in 12 years. Like, I feel that people in the room can relate to that. They're like, oh yeah, I had my small business and now I'm doing my MBA and this and that. So people were sharing their stories. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's kind of reassuring, right? We're like, okay, don't be scared, do it. And then you never know.
Just do it. There's always something else.
And there's always ways to gain experience. As much as you may think at the time, oh, this was a lower role, or this was this role, it's what you put into it, get out of it, the relationship you build that when you're in it, that you will find helps scaffold that into an opportunity or a move that you didn't necessarily think you were going to make, but you made because it made sense with all those different experiences that you'd learned.
Absolutely.
Well, I might leave, I might sort of introduce Tam at this point. It's actually great that you're late because really, Sylvia, there was so many levels to the conversation we were talking about. Now, Tam, you're all mine for almost an hour. So, yeah, talking about remand there. She's in my position here for a minute. But no, I think it gives us an opportunity to do that. So, if anyone has any questions for Sylvia, we've got the email there. I'm sure she's got a million things to do. So I will move over to Tam if that's okay. Perfect. So Tam, I'm so excited that you're actually, you made it, which is fantastic. I'm just going to go ahead and put your organization in the chat because I actually didn't know much about your organization until you had actually come into Career Roads and you had put a posting in there as well. And then I sort of reached out to think like, oh, this could be a great opportunity for some of our students, given the type of volunteer work that is going on and that you do with your organization. Also leading from what Sylvia said is there's lots of opportunities in how volunteerism can lead, build up on what you're looking to do. And then you can help have those conversations when you make applications into positions such as those with the Parole Board. So Tam, please, I'll give you the floor here and sort of introduce yourself.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. Unfortunately, I was on a call. I had, I thought I had his book properly. Megan and I are back and forth. I'm in there, I'm there. And then next thing you know, I see Megan saying, so I do apologize for my tardiness. Junior Achievements of BC is a nonprofit organization that focuses on initially financial literacy. We've expanded to work readiness and entrepreneurship now. We work with students from grade 4, so we start pretty young, all the way up to grade 12. And we also have expanded our reach to organizations that work with youth adults, with young adults up to ages like 29. So our programs are quite adaptable and flexible to adapt to the needs of the organizations or the individual classes or what they're focusing on. We've been around 68 years. So, and still lots of people do not know about our work and how we've tried to expand our reach to help educate about financial literacy, learning how to manage money, learning what, the concept of saving and spending and what that looks like and how to budget properly. And now venturing into entrepreneurships, planting the seeds for those young entrepreneurs that have no idea where to start with. So we sort of incorporate some of their interest to how it could look like as a business concept. And there's one program where we have company program we call, where it's a 16 weeks that's mentored by 2 business gurus that coach our young students to think about starting a business, doing the product, launching it, selling it, and then competing it on a national level across JA Canada. So JABC is part of JA Canada, who is part of JA Worldwide. And in the last 3 years, JA Worldwide has been nominated for the Nobel Prize. Now, that came as a shock to us because normally Nobel Prize winners are like the Albert Einsteins, the Doctors Without Borders. So we're in that league of global impact that I'm pretty proud to be a part of. So even if we don't win, it's okay. We've been nominated. So it's hard to get a nomination, let alone anticipate winning, but it's great to be amongst the nominees each for the 3rd year in a row. So pretty impressive. And we work with volunteers. So that's our secret sauce is our volunteers and the expertise and the knowledge base that gets brought into the classroom to share with our students.
I think that's just so important. I mean, whether you win or not, it's not going to change the amazing work that you do, right? So it's not like everyone's not going to show up to work tomorrow because like, oh gosh, we didn't win this award. But just it's validating. I feel like just or to be acknowledged in that place along amongst others that you feel are doing this incredible work. It's like, oh, we're doing incredible work too. Hold on a minute here, which I think is just so valuable. And I had such a great opportunity to look at your website and to look at the volunteer process. It's actually quite an easy process. They make it quite accessible on the site. But what I feel like looking at it is it's so impactful for the ages that you in fact serve, and so within the classroom and working with children, and financial literacy and working with money, and that impact that really can have to someone who maybe isn't learning those skill sets at home, and it's not a skill set their parents have, or there's a number of different factors that are not allowing for the transference of learning for that young individual. So tell me a little bit about, the organization, and what a volunteer might sort of expect, in volunteering with the JABC.
Well, with like, so my job as the manager of business development is welcoming new volunteers, or bringing back existing volunteers that took a break since COVID sort of made a bit of a decline in that. So we're trying to rebuild our volunteer base, and we are trying to make it as easy as possible. But because we are working with youth and bringing volunteers into the school environment, we do have a bit of a volunteer onboarding process that we need to follow, and that's in along with the guidelines required by JA Canada, because we're part of the JA Canada on a national level. So with volunteer onboarding, what I do is the application is online, so pretty easy. It takes very little time, maybe 10-15 minutes of your time to do it, just to give us some information about what your interests are, what your area of expertise would be, and where it would be a good fit. We have about 13 programs that we want to match you to. We want to make sure that it's the proper match, and to your preference and to your availability. Most of our programs are 4 hours, so we want to make 4 hours programs, but it's delivered over 1 hour sessions. So we want to make sure that there's a commitment there, because we don't want to disappoint the students or the educators. We want to make sure that when we match you to a program, that you're there to start and finish it off, and then connect with our students, because we're there to inspire them to either go into the finance world, or to as a career choice, or to learn about money management, having that conversations with your banker, with your parents. I always say when I'm in the classroom, if you have questions, go talk to your banker. I was a banker, and I appreciate the questions. So come and ask your banker, because they're the one that are the experts in that organization's, what products are available, what's going to be the best fit for them. Because I think there's this perception that you don't talk to your banker, or you can't reach out and talk to your banker. So I don't know if everybody feels that way, but it feels like that's the gap. Like, you do your ATM, your transactions, you take your money out, you pay your bills online, and those are the convenience of the daily stuff. But if you want knowledge and information, always go to your banker, make an appointment, check and ask, because they're happy to talk to you and educate you and share with you.
I think that's great feedback. And it was interesting. I know we had a set of sort of questions that we're looking at. I'm not going to put you on the spot and go, way off track. Like I joked with another participant earlier, or another guest, or an employer guest earlier. But truthfully, I'm seeing so much on your website from a volunteer capacity that students would be able to leverage the experiences that they would potentially have with your organization, into a new career, especially if they're transitioning into another career and maybe haven't done that facilitation piece, or maybe haven't done that working with different socioeconomic backgrounds or ethnicity groups, or whatever the sort of differences. What have you seen volunteers have gone off to do? Have you had experience in seeing how it's allowed for them to leverage that into something else?
Yeah, the presentation skills. So we talked about that, and the facilitating, public speaking. It's builds confidence. If you're a shy person, this is a great way to sort of overcome that shyness, to be able to speak to a topic. We provide you with the program content, so you don't have to create anything up. You just have to follow it, and then add your own personal experience, like when you were 13, when you were 15. Maybe you didn't have the guidance that you're hoping that you're going to share with the class delivery, but that just builds that confidence where you can, like, okay, it's only an hour, I can do this, and you come back, and it does get better each time you go back into the classroom. And I think over time and over practice, you can. Hard to believe with what I'm speaking today that I was once a shy person. I did not like public speaking, and now I deliver programs to 30, 50 classes students. So it really does build your confidence from my own personal experience, but also gaining that knowledge and understanding what the students today are looking at and how you could sort of tweak your delivery. For instance, adapting to the audience. I always encourage, like, read your audience, look at their faces. Are they retaining what you're saying? Because what you think is normal may not be to their comprehension level. So you have to fine tune your delivery, or you can practice a different style of delivery just to get that engagement.
And such a relevant, like, in the workplace skill set going forward. I feel like sometimes it's like, working with students, or the concept of connecting the experience. It doesn't matter where the experience is from, whether it's, cultural, whether it's disability, whether it's lived, whether it's volunteer, whether it's employment, but to say, in an interview, this reminds me of the facilitation that I did when I volunteered at JABC. I thought I was all gung-ho and I knew the information, but you're talking about being adaptable in the workplace. Man, did I have to adapt, because gosh, I did not know what I was doing. Like you said, I read the room and it was not the right read. Thinking about that in a professional setting, to say, I'm great at leading meetings because I learned, that yes, there's content, but then there's also people. And so that connection between the material. So it's interesting to think of how that can then build into your, professional environment.
Yeah, I think personal connection is really important in any environment. So facilitating a program delivery, and you've got a young audience too, right? So you got to be able to communicate with them and share, like, a lot of the time you have to probe some of the questions, probe them to be more engaging with you. So those are the skill sets that, you get practice with, like, what type of questions are you going to ask them? How do you get them to be more engaged without singling them out? You've got a class of 25 students, some are shy, some are super engaged, and then sometimes managing the super engaged students who I feel sometimes can dominate the classroom, and then the other ones get a little shy and they'd be happy to listen. So trying to find that happy balance of giving everyone an opportunity and encouraging the shy ones to speak. So that's where I've honed my skills over the years. I look at their faces, and it's okay, maybe we can ask so and so if they'd like to have any thoughts on what we're discussing.
And it really is just such a valuable skill set. I'll tell a little personal story here, in that my kids used to go, when they were younger, to a Montessori program, and Montessori the one they went to used to have this special helper, and they'd put it on masking tape, and I used to come and pick up the kids and be like, why are they special helper? Like, oh, Mom, I got to do this today. I got to wipe the tables. I got to do this. I got to put this away. And it dawned on me, y'all were being a little eager and pushy with the needs today with the other part, kids. So special helper was a way to engage them with an activity, while the, Montessori teachers could, in fact, deal with all the other things. And so I laughed at that, but that's actually stayed with me in a professional capacity, in that when you're facilitating to a large group, you're going to have different levels and needs. And what can you do to give somebody a special project or something that they can explore, while you can sort of attempt to meet everybody where they're at, and give them what it is that they need in that moment. So I thought that was
yeah. I always try to get myself some assistance when I go into a classroom. I says, who's tech savvy? Who can set this up for me? Who's this and that? And that it's them showcasing their skill sets or their comfort level in the classroom. So, and getting them engaged and involved, and then they're all eager to help out. And then the next class is like, can I help you with anything? So it's nice to create that safe environment. So that's part of facilitating a program for us, is creating that safe environment for all students and encourage them to be open-minded and forgiving. And I mean, we'll make mistakes. Sometimes I'll say, they're distracting me. I came in here with a purpose, so I need to educate you on a few things. And then it's like, save those questions, or teaching them to be patient, and you being patient with them too, so that they respect your time there, and you respect their time that they've given you to welcome you into the classroom. So it's a mutual collaboration.
And yeah, true reciprocity, you know, of give and take of individuals. And I can honestly tell the students that are here today from a career development capacity, and having spoken with employers, you know, throughout my entire career, is that those transferable skill sets of knowing how to communicate and reading a room and delivering a great presentation, especially to a potential CEO, you got to get that out in, you know, 15 seconds. What are the key pieces? What does he need to learn? And how do you need to say it? And these are the kinds of volunteer roles that you may not get in this experience. You may not get in the role that you're going after, you know, after you exit university or earlier in your career or transitioning careers. But if you can selectively go after volunteer opportunities that are going to give that to you, you will be able to talk to that in an interview to say, I can now speak to a CEO, I can speak to their 9-year-old child, or I can understand where he's coming from when a concept isn't reaching somebody the way that it should in our business. So I think it's fascinating to me of just the transferable things that could come from that kind of volunteer experience.
Yeah, for sure. Like we work with a diversity of volunteers. We have volunteers in the health industry, in the robotics. Like we've gone to digital because we had to go to digital. We've got TechWorks. So we open our opportunities for the students to look at career paths in so many different areas. So volunteering with us could be in a program delivery. It could be as a guest speaker on your career experience. So maybe not today, but maybe later on in life, when you've got your degree and you've got your employment and you want to speak about what your experience was like or what path took you to where you are, because just sharing that really empowers the students. Like, you know, they're not set in one way. So volunteering with us gives us an opportunity to learn about all the other industries. Like our World of Choices is about career path, and we cover from hospitality to transportations to health. Like, you know, February is health month, so we covered on the health industry. We're doing entrepreneurship next month. So all of that sort of opens the eyes. And being a volunteer, if you have an area of expertise that you are interested in sharing with us, then that's where we want you. And also being able to share, practicing your skills and sharing what you have experienced in a classroom environment in person, and be ready for those questions, Q&A as we call it. So that they just shoot questions at you and thinking on your feet and being able to answer them if you can.
I just love your answers. And I think I really start to think about like the transferability of skill sets and your passion for wanting to effectuate change or create the leaders of tomorrow or arm people with information that they may otherwise not have access to for various reasons. So we talk about so much of this, like, oh, I didn't have opportunity to get it. You know, sometimes you have to go out and create that opportunity. And sometimes you have to go out and say, well, if I'm not going to get that job, I'm going to go out and get that experience. Or I value making a change so much that I want to work with these children and I want to show them what maybe somebody else didn't offer them. So, I mean, not fully altruistic, because you get to have that experience to take into a new job and say, you know, I've got these great skill sets, but I want to show you how passionate I am. I want to show you how connected I am to my community, or how much I love children, or how much I love talking about finance, you know, and I can't tell you in a job interview how valuable that is for the employer. So for you, Tam, when you get volunteer applications that come in, what kinds of questions or what do you look for from volunteer applications?
Well, I mean, I've been fortunate. I get to look at the applications that come through online, and there's been some great responses and information about how they want to give back to the community, how they want to support the youth of today. Maybe they didn't have the opportunity to learn about this. They wish they had learned about some of the stuff that we're teaching that they had the opportunity, or it could be a cultural difference that they weren't taught at home with their parents, and not being able to be prepared for after high school, or learning how to manage their money when they were working part-time. So we have programs that teaches our students that, and if you were able to go in and share that, I'm sure that we've all had struggles with, you know, not having the money, or not having the money to treat ourselves to some things. So learning how to save for stuff that you want, that are nice to have, versus the necessity of paying for your tuition, and how you want to stay in school, and how to, you know, maybe go out for McDonald's.
Mhm.
Just those kind of treats, sometimes that's not feasible. Whereas if we taught them how to learn, how to manage, how to save their money and understand their style of saving, style of money management. Are you a saver or a spender? And maybe just make some adjustments so that you can have that good balance of being a saver, but also being able to have a choice to and have the funds to spend or make a purchase that you want to treat yourself to.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
all of those are shared in our application, and then really picking up the energy from our volunteers are one that gives back to the community. We do draw people that want to support their community, their schools, give back to their neighborhood, and just giving us the opportunity to expand their reach to also share their passion about financial literacy or entrepreneurship, or just being able to inspire the youth of today to look at some options in life.
It's just so awesome to hear, really, because we also know too that there are gaps, and whether it be that there's two working parents now due to the wage disparity versus the cost of living, and potentially there's less people in the home able to have those conversations, or people have moved away from traditional sort of money management or financial management, or there's more of a debt ratio than the previous, decades people have been comfortable carrying. But I think it's what you're speaking to is but being part of the solution and just being mindful of we all know volunteering, not all of us have all this extra time laying around. So to be mindful to curate the right volunteer experience that for you. And something to think about is you had mentioned when we talked that these are often remote opportunities that don't require the sort of criminal record check because you're not in person. So being able to volunteer from your home, I mean, that's kind of a great thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for us, unless we have a collaboration with the teachers, so when you volunteer, you're not left alone in the classroom with 25 students. The teacher is there. So we don't need to do a criminal records check. The only time we ever need that is if you are like an after school programs where the teachers are not available. And that's more of our older programs, like their company programs, or the Be Entrepreneur programs where the older students, like grade 10 to grade 12 kind of thing. And that's where the criminal records check would be, just so that we make sure that we have the right volunteers in front of these students for the comfort of and meeting the requirements that we need to do. I mean, that's pretty common practice for anybody that's volunteering with, youth or vulnerable sector, that we do that. So, but we try to make it as easy as possible. So the level 2 is what we need, and going into having that same expectations from the teachers that they're there to support the behavioral side, but you're really there to facilitate our programs, our content, and share your experience with them and get your presentation skill practice or honing your skills that you may already have. And also just learning the different, what's happening out there today with grade 4s up to grade 12. I think things have really changed from probably when I was growing up, and maybe for you too, Megan.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the landscape and the environment has changed, and school has changed. The curriculum has changed, and I think the silly dances we did in our living room versus the makeup we wore to the stuff I see now, even on my own daughter. I'm like, man, you're sophisticated. I don't know, like, woof, I was not there, So, but yeah, absolutely, things have changed, and families have changed, dynamics have changed. The lots of different things. And I really think of it like from a place of you say you like as an individual applying for a role, you say you want to go and do these things and be passionate and be a change maker and be innovative. Like this is an opportunity to be part of that solution by engaging the future leaders of tomorrow, by arming them and assisting them and facilitating skills that are really going to help them in the future. And being able to talk to that in your career, in your jobs in the future is hugely beneficial, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we've got volunteers like myself. I volunteered for 12 years before joining Junior Achievements of BC as the program manager. It was just one of those things. I was part of my culture is that JABC is my extended family. So when I joined, it felt like I was just joining in my family when I started working with giving back to the community, being rewarded. And the stats for our alumni that participate in our program is like 75% go on and continue on to succeed in their career path. So that's a pretty good ratio for those who have attended our programs and what they take away from our programs to be able to move forward.
I think that's fantastic. I know I'd put a couple of the sort of programs in there. As you look at your organization and the need for volunteers, what kind of skill sets are jumping out to you as like nice to haves or really looking for as you move forward with your volunteer selection or applicants?
You know, when I speak to our volunteers, I'm gauging the commitment and the passion to get and wanting to give back to the community, because you really, like for us, you don't need to be an expert, because we're teaching the fundamentals, stuff that everybody should know from grade, but if not given the opportunity, they wouldn't know, or just maybe clarifying some of the misconceptions and perceptions that are out there about Bitcoins and what the options of making your payments are, and just teaching our students the best actions to take or critical decision making. So if you're passionate that way and you're great with, you know, interacting with students or a young adult audience, then that's really the key thing, because you can learn what we have in our program, but the sharing and the personal experience is what's valuable to our program deliveries. There are other organizations that offer similar services that we have, but I think it's our volunteers that makes it different and stand out and resonates with the students, because there's feedback from students, like, you know, we ask them, what did you want to learn? It's like, I learned to save. So we asked them, like, out of this 4 hours, what did you learn? And says, oh, I learned about GIC, or I learned about that you can use your bank card online. Like, those conversations don't happen, like Apple Pay, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes they don't happen at home, and we help to educate that. And if we can find volunteers that can engage in that environment with our young audience, then that's really the importance of needing our volunteers and the criteria that we look for.
And I think just to add on that, if I may, don't underestimate the very, very important skill set of being able to take information down to its simplest form or easiest to comprehend form. That skill set in itself will help you your entire career. It isn't dumbing it down. It isn't talk to me like I'm in grade 5 or talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. It isn't that. It's about, I'm uncomfortable somehow about this topic, or I don't know anything about it. Can you make me feel psychologically safe in learning about that in any environment in which you learn? And I think that this is such a great opportunity for students who have a financial background or skills, or even just a people connecting skill set, and want to break into potentially something different. And then just being able to say in an interview down the road, yeah, this really reminds me about just keeping things to the core concepts, or learning how to take things down to the granular and explaining things in a way that people feel they want to learn more. That in the business world is huge.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, when I was in the financial world, I had to, depending on who was in front of me, I had to break it down. What was the best way to communicate or share some insight to clients? So it's definitely practice skills, and JA gives you that opportunity to do that, and you can come back and practice with different programs. So you're not stuck with one program, but you can change it, add some repertoire and diversity to what you want to practice with and which audience you want to practice with. So start young and then you go up to high school. Some people say high school students are a little bit a tough audience, but you know what? I've really not had that. I mean, I've walked away with really engaged high school students that just want to keep learning more, and they wish we had more time. Right? Not just more than the 4 hours and the 4 lessons that we taught.
I just think it's so fantastic. And I'm so glad that you were able to be here, and that I wrangled you into this later session where I just had the privilege of speaking both with yourself and Sylvia independently, because I think it was just so awesome. I'd love to know if there's any questions from the students about volunteering or about the JABC organization. If not, y'all are just going to hear my voice for the next little bit. But I'd love to hear if there's any sort of questions or comments from the students.
I believe that there has been some interest from Royal Roads University since we posted our position. So we've had some join us as volunteers. So hopefully they'll share their experience with their colleagues and their friends, because it's a great opportunity, and I appreciate having the opportunity to be here to speak to everyone. And thanks, Megan, for inviting me. I couldn't do it because I live in Peachland to be in person, but virtual is a great platform to do.
Oh, that's just fantastic. Yeah, so there is a volunteer coordinator position that's currently listed in Career Roads right now. Was it volunteer facilitator coordinator? Maybe you can help me with that exact name of the position.
Are you speaking to me?
Yeah, sorry, Tam. You just recently posted one, I believe.
Yeah, so that's the coordinator, which is more of an admin in the background, where they coordinate some of the processing, the onboarding that I work with. I work closely with that individual to just streamline our references, and then I jump in and do the interviews. So the coordinator does more of the behind the scenes, but knowing how a nonprofit organization works is also another benefit. Yeah. To learning. JABC is the biggest charter in Canada, which I didn't realize that until I joined. We actually have a staff of 26 versus some charters that do not. Sometimes they work with 4. So we are a growing organized charter for JA Canada. So that position is much needed because we're coordinating 2,800 programs a year, impacting 65,000 students, if not more. Coordinating, some of our virtual stuff. So that position is a key role in the behind the scenes. We are the face of JA, but this individual makes everything works for us from behind the scenes.
I think that's fantastic. Yes, to remember that all the roles might not be facilitation in nature or classroom facing, that as we learned from a number of our different employers today, there are many cogs in the wheel that allow for the operation to move forward. And when in doubt, just reach out. And potentially there are opportunities for field practice, or there's opportunities for I'm not sure what that opportunity would look like, but I think it's potentially open for discussion, because some of the practicum or field practice opportunities are unpaid. So maybe there is an opportunity there for students who are looking for a shorter term practicum, and maybe that could be done there. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to expand our reach to volunteers to the high school level in careers, because we find that they're seeking for experience opportunities. So volunteering with us, starting at, I've got grade 10s reaching out to me, and we're trying to figure out ways how we can support them to volunteer more with our experienced volunteer facilitators, so that they have a partner or a team lead to support them through, because it can be a little overwhelming when you've got students. So we're looking to have them paired up to the younger audience, grade 4 or 5. So because the younger students looked up to the older students. Yeah. So we're trying to create that environment as well, and give our youth, the high school students, the opportunity to do that. So that's in the works, and that's something that I'm working on as part of the business development team to make it a possibility going forward.
I think that's awesome. As I say, the need is going to expand, and I think the types of students that are going to be, the schools that are going to be accessing those services or wanting those services, and that's going to change too. So from a business development, piece is like, okay, I can handle where we're at right now, but we're going to be down the road here in the business. And I think if we can talk to the students also, from Royal Roads, the ones that are here, the ones that are watching this recording, just because it's not on the website doesn't mean don't reach out. Just because you don't see what it is that you know about doesn't mean don't reach out. Tam, sounds like you're always working on different ways to promote the business. So when in doubt, reach out. Right?
Oh, for sure. And I think that's what the parents, the students are reaching out to me, which shows initiatives from my perspective. It's I'm speaking to a grade 11 who wants to expand their leadership skills. And so they're looking at us what are their opportunities for me? So I try to make it possible. within a parameter that we need to work with. So I'm excited to work with the high school students in a volunteer capacity, because they need their volunteer hours, and why not Junior Achievements BC, right? With all the skills that they can learn from presenting and volunteering for us as facilitators.
Mhm. I just think that's awesome. And I will admit that I didn't really even know the work that you did. So just even me learning about that and just having a little piece of my heart as like, I mean, I've worked in employment services for the last 5 or 6 years, primarily in my early years of that subset of 18 to 29. So I'm working quite a bit with youth. And I will say that a lot of youth that I worked with really didn't have a strong handle on financing and budgeting, and what it meant to get a paycheck, and what it was like when taxes got taken off, and what they could afford in terms of, what eating out did to them, and the debit charges that occur when you use your debit card over using cash and saving and whatnot. So I truly believe that starting that work earlier, so they get to the point where they're applying for roles and understanding what they need to make even to survive, much the less even save or be in a comfortable position in their career. So it really just is so important.
It is, yeah, we truly feel that way. So grade 4 is great, and we're trying to find ways on how we could expand our program accessible to the younger audience, like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, in a more shorter time frame. We're working with Girl Guides. They're wanting our program so that they can break it down and teach their Girl Guides to earn their money badge.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Pretty cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool.
And Boys and Girls Club. So we've expanded not just in school districts now, we're going out to other nonprofit organizations that have the same goal and value, that they want to expand their financial literacy.
Oh, that's so great.
Mhm.
Nancy, are there any questions in the room, or do you have any questions? Oh, now that she's gone off camera, she can be like, hey, hold on a minute. Why did you just call me off camera here? I think Nancy may have gone to get a golf cart for one of our in-person exhibitors. So that's okay. We're not going to pretend that she's gone and we don't have her. But yeah, I think that if anyone wants to come off mute or put any questions about volunteering into the chat, I'm just so grateful, Tam, that you were able to join us today. I do know that the volunteer coordinator position is in Career Roads, but there's lots of opportunity. And I don't know if it's okay, but would you like for anyone to be able to reach out to you, or what would the best way if anyone's interested?
Yeah, they want to reach out to me. I'm just going to put my email address on here. Pretty easy, tam.din@jabc.org. Or you can just go straight through our community email, and they'll get sent to me. Just say we saw Tam at the Royal Roads, add some questions, or contact me directly. And when JA worldwide covers a lot of countries. I see Danielle says she's from Peru. JA works with underserved students, so the beneficiary is different here. I don't know much about Peru and what is being covered, but we can talk and we can see if we can compare. But we also we're focusing on some of the underserved areas ourselves in BC. And it is something that is on a national level that JA Canada is also working on. Because there's certain areas that we haven't been able to expand to. So we just need to find some ways.
Yeah, my question was, thank you for your speech. Sorry, I got into the meeting a little bit late. But just to explain the context in Peru Junior Achievement, because in my country there is like private education and public education, and it's a very big gap between both. So I know that Junior Achievement works mostly with underserved children and students for public schools, which are like a very low level of education. Because I am new here, I just wanted to understand if your beneficiaries are like underserved or are more for public schools. That's the reason of my question.
So we work with all sectors. We work with underserved students. As part of the strategy when we started, we were working with the schools, so that was the biggest audience that we would have access to. but that doesn't mean that we're limited to how we can service. What our goal is to be able to provide our service for everyone to have access to our programs. Our donors believe in that, so our donors support that. So if we see, like, we're trying to expand on a national level, and I think a worldwide level is to reach 100,000 students by 2026, which means that if we're currently at 65,000 right now, we need to expand our reach, and underserved is definitely an area that we're looking at to reach out. We're not limiting ourselves to that. We want more expansion. So pass the word along that we want everyone to reach out to us and say, if you would like our programs in your organizations or your class, then connect with us through our website, reach out to us, and we'll explain the process to get a program into your classroom or organizations or anything of that. So we do serve that. We're not private. We don't keep it exclusive to anyone. We are available to anyone, to any organizations that want our programs in. And sometimes we will even tweak it and make it special. Certainly some learning challenges organizations will tweak our programs and explain and support how it can be delivered so that it's most effective. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Okay.
That's an awesome question. That actually brought up something for me because my children are in the Francophone program. Are any of the programs offered in French, or are they all at this time English?
Yes, we do have some in French. We have struggles with French speaking volunteers. So that is a limitation. I am in the works of speaking to the Francophone of BC, hoping to see that if we can get our programs in there. We do have more of the younger audience, like younger grades, like grade 4 or 5, up to grade 9. So our dollar with cents is in French. We just can't offer French delivery because we don't have enough French speaking volunteers to do that. But we encourage our teachers who are teaching the French to take on our program. We'll send them the kit and they can facilitate in French if they wish to. One teacher likes to do in both languages. So she got both English and French, so that because she's teaching them French to learn both languages and to learn about financial literacy in both ways. So she's a very creative teacher. And if you're up for it, then yeah, we want to support that too.
Well, I know that my kid's school is the School District 93, the Francophone school board, and I know that they'd likely be interested in that as well, just because it's really not a topic that's covered in the kids' curriculum.
Well, let's chat, Megan, on the sidebar.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
You bet. Great question, Daniel. Thank you.
And I think sort of to explore on that a little bit too, as we see the cost of living rise and as we see the difference between, a one-parent household or the disparity between wages and cost of living, the need and what defines an underserved student is changing rapidly, I would imagine, just simply because of the factors that I mentioned there. I don't know, Tam, if that's sort of the case as well, right?
Yeah, since 2021, we've been able to expand our reach into the Indigenous communities as well. So we actually have a director that is part of the Indigenous community, and she and her team has been able to, I think we're at 134 programs and then they've started their first virtual JA company program. So that's where the entrepreneurial concept come in, and we have been business industry experts that are coaching our students to think about creating a business and applying all they learned during those virtual sessions to go and launch a business. So that's exciting. We haven't done that in the Indigenous communities, and we're doing it virtually. So we've got, I think, 12 Indigenous communities participating in that, and there is a waiting list. So we know there's a need for it and there's a want for it.
Yeah, I agree. That's that's just amazing.
But still lots to do.
Always.
Yeah. So we can get more volunteers and we can definitely give that impact.
Yeah, it's true. And we didn't really talk about all in all, what is the sort of requirement, time commitment that you would ask for from the volunteers?
Our standard program is 4 hours. So 4 hours in the classroom or virtually, and 90-minute training for the specific program that you're going to be delivering, and then maybe 2 hours of your prep time. So in total, 7 to 10 hours, depending on your learning curve and how much you want to digest in. But yeah, 10 hours. And after that, after the first initial onboarding, then it's really up to you if you want the additional training for a specific program. Our training is always available if you want a refresher, if you took a 6-month break and just want to refresh, you're welcome to just check out our calendar and sign on for a registration. But yeah, and then 1 hour maybe once a week, because it's delivered over weekly, or sometimes depending on your schedule or the teacher's schedule, you can do it twice a week, and then it's over 2 weeks and the program is delivered.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think I wasn't sure if there's another comment, or maybe, no, okay. Maybe we just spoke at the same time and it was like the Thunderdome of voices. There could only be one, right? Well, thank you so much for joining us. Before I kind of head out, I'm going to go help the different event and wrap up some of the activities from today. Is there anything else, Tam, you'd like to add, or if any of the students have anything to comment before we head out?
I just want to thank the opportunity to be able to chat with your audience and be on here. So hopefully we've answered some questions, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at all. You've got my email in the chat there.
Absolutely. And to remember that reaching out to us, career services at railroads.ca, we're obviously very up for and able to connect you with any of the panelists and esteemed employers that were able to join us today. And I see Heather, so I can like breathe out. I don't have to keep talking.
I just wanted to pop on really quick and say hello to students and guests. Thanks for coming today. Nancy had to pop out, so I'm sort of jumping in at the end, but I've been listening along, and thanks so much for the great advice. And just a reminder to students that if you need any career services, to jump in and book an appointment on LibCal with a career advisor. We're here to support you. And I'm going to stop the recording at this point of the session. And thanks again.